Hey there, thanks for tuning into Duck Bricks. I'm Chris, and today I pose a simple question. Why on earth does this cost $700 US? Let's backtrack a little. This is set number 42146, the LEGO Technic Liebherr Crawler Crane. It just released on August 1st, 2023, and comes with 2,883 pieces for a whopping price of $699.99 US. So at first glance, you're probably wondering, why even make this video? The answer is obvious. This is not worth $700 if you look at the price per part ratio. But to be completely honest, I feel like this set is a really good example of a LEGO set that you can't really judge based on the number of pieces included. Yes, $700 for around 3,000 pieces, actually less, is by no means a good deal by normal LEGO set standards. But this is no normal LEGO set. You see, this absolute monstrosity of a set has 6 individual motors controlling different aspects of its movement, from the rotation of the crane itself to being able to drive along the ground, as well as, of course, to operate the massive crane itself, as well as 2 individual Bluetooth remote-controlled battery boxes, which you can control from a smart tablet or device. In terms of power functions, this has some of the most power functions ever included in a single LEGO set, and introduces several new molds specifically made for the set as well, like pretty much all the pieces that make up the crane pieces itself, from the yellow elements here to the gray elements here, were made for the set, as well as a number of large weight elements which are intended to essentially be counterweights to balance out whatever weight you choose to put at the end of the crane itself. And most importantly, this thing actually works. You can actually lift different items from the end of the crane. These counterweights are actually included, so they essentially counterbalance whatever weight you put on the crane itself. And there's even a built-in sensor on the Bluetooth hubs that lets you know if you're carrying too much weight and are at any risk of tipping. And that is a really, really cool feature. Now, this is built to work like an actual real-life crane. And that comes with a lot of pros and cons. The way the string is done is very realistic in terms of how the string is threaded through the model itself. It is probably one of the most complex string wrapping jobs in any LEGO set. And this is even including back in the day when they were having to do the full rigging for pirate ships. That was nothing compared to the insane amount of loops that you have to make with the string on this particular set. Now, there is a lot to talk about here. And of course, the main question I again do want to answer with this video is this worth $700? And I'm going to say right now, your mileage will absolutely vary. I think it really depends on what you want to get out of a set like this. I certainly have my own thoughts, but let's jump into the review right now. So first of all, I am using the LEGO Technic Control Plus app. This is the app that they basically use for all of their remote controlled things. I personally have some mixed feelings on the fact that all of the modern LEGO Technic vehicles and remote control things are app controlled and they don't have a physical remote to control them by. On the one hand, it allows for a lot more versatility in what you can do. For instance, you can connect multiple hubs. You don't need to make a custom remote controller for each individual set. But on the other hand, I feel that every single app has an expiry date. There is always an expiration on an app, and I'm just worried that in 10 years, 15 years, 20 years, you might not be able to control this, and that is very, very unfortunate for a $700 set. But that's a problem that is shared across pretty much every modern Technic set with power functions, not just this one, so I'll set that aside for now and we can take a look at how this works. So first of all, the control setup allows you to drive the model backwards and forwards. It does not have a very impressive speed, which totally makes sense. It is literally built like a tank in the sense that you can drive it forwards and backwards. There are 2 levers in which I'm using to control it. I can also turn it so you can actually have this turn around. Although it is a little bit finicky in the way you need to turn it. If you really want it to turn in a certain direction, you really just have to move one of the wheels forwards or backwards like this. And so you can see you can actually get it to make some amount of turns right here. It is on carpet right now. I would say this personally works better on hardwood floor sometimes, just depending on what you want to do with it. But yeah, that's basically how the movement of the set works itself. Let me get this in a position where I can actually showcase some of the other features. So we'll back it up a little bit here. Now, all the motors can move simultaneously, so I'm going to demonstrate that in a second, but first of all, I want to showcase that you can rotate this around. Now this actually has some speed to it, like you can actually swing this around to a pretty fast degree, which is pretty impressive. I was not expecting this to move that quickly. Now I barely have enough space in my hallway to actually move this back and forth the entire way, but it does rotate the full 360 degrees, which is really cool because it's just so satisfying to actually see this essentially move on its own. Now, there are some ball bearings underneath the model itself, which allows this part to slide across the floor when you're not carrying any weight. And then of course, you can actually control the movement of the crane itself. So first one is simple. You can raise and lower the winch here, which allows you to pick up different objects, go all the way down to the ground if you want to, so that is a nice feature that just makes a lot of sense for a crane to have. But then the really cool part happens with this, because you can actually change the entire position of the crane depending on what you want to do with it, move it back and forth. I'm going to try to rotate it all the way downwards for 1 point just to showcase the full range of motion for this model. So I'm just essentially pushing this one time. There is one winch that is spinning right now, allowing this to bend all the way down, and this can bend so low it can literally go off the table. Like if you put this on the edge of a table, you can make this actually dangle off the edge of something. So as you can see, now I'm actuating the other one as well, so the entire thing is bending really, really low, and that is a very, very impressive amount of bend that you get here. I'm going to pull the winch all the way up to the top, and yeah, you can see that you can really just go crazy with this. But now I'm going to raise it upwards and see what is essentially the highest position that I can put it in. Again, you can do all of this while driving it at the same time, which is pretty insane. Like, I can just do that while driving, and then I guess if I really wanted to go crazy with it, with multiple hands, I could even rotate at the same time as well. So all of this can happen at the same time, which is absolutely insane to see everything moving at once. So super satisfying to do that. I'm again going to bring this back upwards here. You'll notice that there is a nice number of string, like there's a lot of loops of string that's being actuated here to allow that to really pull up the entire weight of the crane itself, which is really, really cool. Then I can even bring this upwards here, have them both move at the same time. Let's drive this forwards a little bit while that's happening. And there you go. I think we basically have this to the tallest possible point it can be. So this is a crazy, crazy model in terms of the power functions for sure. Now, some of my favorite things to actually test out with the set itself is that, again, there is a bit of a sensor on the bottom here, which allows you to know whether or not you're about to tip. So if I pull on this gently, it will actually showcase the amount of weight I am carrying on the phone app. If I keep pulling it more and more, let me just go ahead, pull that more and more. There essentially is a progress bar that is filling up in terms of how much weight you can actually put on this. I am really I am exerting a lot of force. Now we are in the red, and now it is warning me that we are in the tipping zone. So that is very, very cool. Like, I really had to tug down on that to get a lot of force to allow that to move downwards. But yeah, there's just so much that you can do with this. It is so much fun to just move around and showcase what you can do with the model itself, which is very, very cool. Now, it is saying right now my model batteries are getting a little bit low, so we might have exerted the amount of stuff that we can showcase with this. Obviously, there's so many functions. This does eat up batteries. I remember I was playing with this, I think for around 15 to 20 minutes, and my batteries were already getting pretty drained, so it takes up a lot of juice, but it absolutely moves like a tank. You can move it around everything that you can think of. Like, you can move it side to side, you can move the entire crane arm. Almost everything does actuate the way that you would expect things to. So I just think that is such a cool thing to play around with. And that absolutely adds to the value of this model. The fact that you can actually pick things up, that you can really control the movement of the crane itself, have the entire thing articulate. That adds a lot of value, and motors are not cheap for LEGO to produce for sure. There are 2 hubs, 6 motors. This has a lot of functions. If you're curious about the layout of the controls, these levers here control the actual movement of the treads themselves, which you can see as I move this one back and forth. These here allow you to control the position of the winch, so you can raise and lower the winch however you see fit, which is a really nice thing to be able to do. And then over here, you can see that you can actually control the movement of the crane arm itself, so you can bring this one upwards, bring it downwards like so, and that allows you to move everything around. And then this slider here turns the entire base of the model back and forth. So as I'm moving the slider back and forth here, I can have a variable speed control of the model itself. In terms of the weight feature, as you can see, the box is black here, but if I were to continue to tug downwards on the model, essentially I just really pull downwards like so, you'll notice the progress bar, so to speak, filling up in terms of the amount of weight this is holding until it gets into red, which is the tipping zone, which makes sense because that is when this is in danger of tipping. As soon as I release, I'm going to release in 3, 2, 1. It snaps back, and there you go. It is just immediately all set and good to go, and the sensor automatically detects that. The way that this works is actually really cool. As you can see, this entire winch is connected up to the crane, which goes around here, but there is a rubber band actuated sensor here. The gyroscopic sensor is inside this model, so if I were to tug downwards on this, that causes a chain reaction that causes this lever to get pulled all the way down to there, which I'm going to do it right now. You can notice this is getting pulled slightly outwards, so you can see this is a tilt sensor here, which is tilting back and forth within the model itself as I pull on it, which allows you to know how much weight you're actually carrying. Now, in terms of the new molds included in the set itself, there are a number of them. The stanchion elements in yellow were created for this set, although they have already appeared in some other sets in different colors, and the same goes for these gray triangular stanchion elements here. Although they were created for the set, they first appeared in Ninjago City markets, which you can see they were used as support pillars in brown right there, which was a kind of nice sneak peek towards what we are going to see in this particular set. Now, the development of the set was really interesting because this was initially supposed to come out last year. It was delayed and the price was increased significantly. I do not know what was going on behind the scenes of developing this, but clearly it required a lot of work to put together. But there are a few oddities about it. Not everything is perfect, and I'm going to talk about those right now. So here's the strange thing about this model. Despite the fact that these pieces were literally developed for the model itself, they don't come in yellow, and if you look at pictures of the actual real-world vehicle, these all should be yellow for the entire crane, and it's very strange how these particular pieces are in dark gray. I guess they add a bit of a splash of color to the model itself with the red on the tips, but the gray just feels a little bit out of place to me. It almost feels like you were trying to construct this out of just existing pieces that LEGO had in their inventory, but we know that's not the case because they made these pieces for this set. If anything, these pieces should have been made in yellow, and then the yellow dictated some limitations for future sets. Potentially, maybe LEGO was thinking, okay, well maybe yellow is too much of a bright color to use for these support pillars, and dark gray is a more useful color for other buildings, which I do agree with, but they did actually recolor it in dark brown to use for the Ninjago set and for some other sets, and I believe some of the other sets also got different recolors, so clearly they were okay with recoloring it, which is why that their inclusion here in dark gray and not yellow feels very, very strange. The other thing is that if you actually look at photos of the real-world vehicle that this is supposedly based on, the length of the crane itself is much, much longer, and maybe that would have been unrealistic for a LEGO set, but it should have extended to maybe even about here or even longer at its full highest position. The other thing is that the treads should be probably double thickness and spread outwards even further from the body itself. The positioning of the counterweights should be completely different, more like behind here instead of on the sides. And altogether, this is a really strange model because while it is a really good working LEGO crane, the engineering behind this is absolutely phenomenal. It's not a very good model of the Liebherr Crawler, which this is supposed to be based off of. There are so many differences, it's almost as bad as the Hulkbuster for Marvel, where it just doesn't look anything like the source material. And I find that really strange because obviously LEGO knows what this is supposed to look like, and they have reference images and you can look up an image of it, and I almost feel that this set would have been better if LEGO made it non-licensed, could have maybe knocked some dollars off the top as well, just called it motorized LEGO Technic Crawler Crane, and this would have been really great. But because it's supposed to be the Liebherr Crawler Crane, it feels like it doesn't really match the source material that well, especially when compared to the real-life model. For one of the first times in a LEGO set, the brand new pieces, specifically the larger elements, were packaged in their own boxes. Not even in bags, they came basically just loose in the box where you can see just how many of the different elements we are getting. This isn't even all of them because this was basically halfway through the build, but it was really interesting seeing 4 different boxes and having pretty much only some of them actually have standard LEGO parts in them. And if you're curious about the way the controls work, there's actually quite a lot of different things that can be done with the controls themselves. Not only can you just move the model backwards and forwards with the levers here and of course actuate the actual crane mechanism itself, but you can also switch the controls from right to left if you want to actuate different parts of it based on whatever fingers you want to use, and there's also a number of other designs. This one, for instance, shows you the center of gravity of the model, so when I tip the model ever so slightly, you may notice that the little green circle in the center will actually move based on where I am moving it, and this is all based on that tilt sensor hidden within the specific model, which we can see in the battery box itself. The other screen here allows you to choose a preset position from highest to lowest to closest to furthest, which is really useful when I'm actually trying to display this. As I mentioned, these are very nice to actually have just preset features so you can just put it in whatever display you want and really show off the range. And I also really find it cool how it collects stats on how long you play with it. I used it for around 20 minutes when I first built it, and then another 10 minutes for this review, which brings the total playtime to 33 minutes. They even have a choice to turn the safety off, where you can lift an unsafe amount of weight, different amounts of warning light activations. It even tracks the distance driven and the lifting distance, which is pretty insane. I think that's really cool that they actually keep all these metrics. And the really great thing about the app is that unlike a lot of the other Control Plus Technic stuff, there aren't a ton of mini games, there aren't little challenges or games you have to complete before being able to use the model. This is a pretty no-nonsense interface to do basically whatever you need to do. The other thing I want to note is that while it is cool to get brand new LEGO weight elements, these don't really have too many connections on them other than some bar connections on the bottom. It is strange how we got so many of these brand new models when previous LEGO weights probably would have done the trick and been a little bit more slim in terms of the positioning on the model itself. The interesting thing about these is that they seem to be basically just hard plastic. Like, there's no metal in them, there are no artificial weights as far as I can tell. I think they are just plastic, at least from playing around with them, and that's why you need so many different weights just to make this model have a good counterweight, because it takes a lot of these to actually weigh any significant amount of weight. That being said, these definitely do add to the price because they are very large, chunky, heavy pieces of plastic, and it does come with a metric ton of them. So, as you can see here, that absolutely ate up a lot of the budget for the set, but my question is, was it really worth it? And yeah, speaking of things being worth it, we've basically come to the end of the video where it's time for me to talk about, do I feel like this model is worth the $700 that I paid for it? I'm going to be completely honest here. That is a really tough question to answer. To provide some comparison, the UCS Millennium Falcons, which I have on my wall next to me, especially the newest one, that one was $800, came with a ton of pieces, and is a really nice and large display model. Other LEGO sets for $700, like the UCS Star Destroyer, are absolutely gargantuan in length and scale, but this set is also really big, but for different reasons. In fact, it uses a lot of the same construction to make up the crane itself. You've got the same pieces being repeated over and over again in a configuration that just makes a lot of sense for the motion of the set itself and for the building process, but doesn't make for the most riveting build, when a lot of the build is spent literally just making these large rectangular pillars. You also have a lot of new molds introduced specifically for the set. You've got this large, wide crane element, you've got the triangular one, you also have the 2 Bluetooth-controlled battery hubs, you also have the 6 motors integrated into the set itself, and that's where value gets a little bit tricky. I'm going to be completely honest, I actually feel that this is not quite as overpriced, or at least as egregiously overpriced as a lot of people are saying. Is it overpriced, and do I think it should be less? Maybe, but this is just so much harder to compare against LEGO's regular products that it's almost impossible for me to say whether or not this is objectively a good deal or a bad deal. It is just so different from LEGO's other product offerings that I can't really compare it to something like the Millennium Falcon or something like the Star Destroyer, because those are having completely different design ideologies, using different pieces, and this is just such a different toy. It is a really great model, I will say that. The power functions are fantastic, they work great, and despite the frustrations with actually stringing everything up, this is really, I would say, well worth the building experience. It is unlike any other LEGO build that I've witnessed. But $700, I don't think this is $700 good. If I had to assign an arbitrary price to this, I would say maybe I feel like this could be worth $500 to $600. And that's a pretty big range. I mean, that's $100 gap, but I really do feel that with the 2 battery boxes, with the motors, and with all the pieces, all the development that went into this, all of you have to consider, of course, the designers had to spend so much time just figuring out how to make this work. All the new molds, 500, 600 feels fair. 700 is pushing it, but it's not nearly as badly overpriced as I initially thought. Like, I thought I was going to come out of this review before I actually built the model, before I played with it. I thought I was going to finish this review just absolutely roasting the set and saying it's only worth like $250 or $300. But you can't argue with the sheer scale of the model. Like, I'm sitting down and my head is like underneath the crane itself. This is a massive, massive model, and I really respect the amount of engineering that went into making it work so well. I just have to say that $700 doesn't feel worth it, but it's not as bad as I initially thought. So $500, $600, I understand that this is a very, very unique opinion, and that's really just how I feel about the set itself. I'm sure that there are going to be a lot of folks in the comments saying, no way, this is worth no more than $250 or $300, and I totally respect that, and I definitely felt the exact same way before I built the set and was like, wow, this is actually a really nicely engineered, well-built set. But that, of course, is just my opinion, and I would love to hear yours, so do let me know down in the comments below, what do you think of this model, especially for the viewers who own this model? If you own this model, do you feel like it was worth what you paid? I am so curious to hear what people think, and absolutely, I mean, this is the largest LEGO Technic set ever. It is one of the most action-packed in terms of power functions. It is truly a feat of engineering, and I'm a big fan of how this turned out. I just don't know if the $700 is worth it, and this is one of the first times I'm ending a review with kind of an inconclusive answer of, I guess I feel like in some vague sense this should be cheaper, but I really don't know how to quantify that, and that leaves me with a weird feeling to sum up this review. But that's all I have to say for this build. Thank you so much for watching. Be sure to like and subscribe for even more LEGO news, reviews, discussion, and analyses coming your way very soon. And please let me know what you think about the set, because I personally am so curious. Bye for now.